Welcome to the Spoiler Alert podcast and happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. For Mother's Day, we're remaining true to our brand by reviewing Kill Bill. My name is Nate. This is Dakota, and we're the Spoiler Alert podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, and wherever podcasts are found. Please click like, subscribe, share the video, tell your friends, tell people that won't shut up about movies. Like if you have those friends in your life that won't shut up about movies and can't take a hint, just send them our way and they'll get it out of their system.
Yeah, no, that's probably exactly who we're for.
That's our market.
So we're
Let's
providing
make
a public service. They'll fuck off. You'll be left in peace. And yeah.
Quentin Tarantino is an interesting director. He made Kill Bill Volumes 1 and 2 in 2003 and 2004. He was a major part of the 90s indie movement. So movies like this include Clerks from Kevin Smith, Richard Linklater films, Paul Thomas Anderson films. I think this movement's actually very similar to the movement of New Hollywood. You may have heard us talk about that before. New Hollywood, they gave a bunch of kind of no-name college students a lot of power and artistic runway to make a lot of movies or to make big budget movies. And now in the 90s, it's a little different. They weren't given a lot of money, but there was more of a, bottom level of director rising to, achievement. A lot of these people never went to film school. Quentin Tarantino never went to film school. Paul Thomas Anderson never went to film school. Richard Linklater went to Texas, and maybe Robert Rodriguez went to Texas too. That sounds right.
Did he? I didn't know about that.
I think he did.
Okay.
He at the very least lived in Austin. But that is one of my favorite eras in movies because we got a lot of fresh ideas from basically people that were fans of movies and are referential towards
movies. Yeah. Well, both. I referential and reverential. Yeah, I mean, both.
And reverential as well. Yeah. That was just a very important era in movie making, and some of our best directors today are people that are left over from that era, and that's how they kind of started up. So it's just a new generation of filmmakers similar to New Hollywood. Kill Bill Volume 1 opens with a kind of black and white prologue of a bride on the floor, bloodied, beaten up. And the audio in that scene is just very loud and in your face. You'd go 0 to 100 right there when Bill, who is unseen in this shot, is loading up a pistol saying that, kiddo, you know me well enough to know that there is nothing sadistic about my actions. And then right as the gun fires, she lets out the words, Bill, it's your baby. Shot to the head.
Right. Yeah, it's and then a great, I mean, all of Tarantino's movies have great soundtracks and but this one was my baby shot me down, bang bang, and that's the opening credits, and there's sort of the silhouette of the bride, and it almost looks like she might be lying in a coffin or something, but it turns out to be a hospital bed. We wouldn't have a movie if she had died unless the whole thing was a flashback. But yeah, it's a hell of an opening. Your main character getting shot in the head.
And then we get the first chapter, which is a classic thing, which is something that Quentin Tarantino does in all of his movies. He has chapters. Chapter 1 is titled 2. It's called 2 because Vernita Green.
She's number 2 on the hit list.
Is number 2 on the hit list.
Okay.
So the first chapter of this film actually chronologically happens after every other chapter. Vernita Green had worked with, we'll call her the bride for now, because at this point we don't know her name. And she's also driving something called the Pussy Wagon at this point.
Yeah,
which is a pretty fun looking Hummer.
well, it's a great way to get the audience involved because you're like, what the fuck is going on?
And the
you just
bright
gotta
yellows,
know.
the really vibrant yellows in that whole chapter like scene were memorable. I think a lot of vibrant yellows in this movie.
Especially just the opening is, I mean, just to get this other, I mean, one of the more unique things about Kill Bill is, I mean, you're using really mundane suburban, suburbia kind of environments with this like classical Eastern, revenge story that I mean, it's so out of place and so weird. I suppose with Netflix and all the things that have taken inspiration from Kill Bill now, it's a little more, people might be a little more adjusted to that, but at the time it was just the weirdest shit ever, that you have this story that, I mean, is ridiculous when you think about it and completely absurd, but it also invites you to take it seriously, and you do. It's like, I don't know, it's totally just really bizarre. I guess a lot of Tarantino movies are, but yeah, you're having a knife fight in some suburban home, and the daughter's coming home from school. I mean, the whole thing's just kind of ridiculous and weird, but it's awesome. And you do take it seriously. So, I mean, in its own reality.
And that's the thing, is they immediately start fighting. And again, it's Vernita Green. It's pretty much explained immediately after the fight that they had worked together, and Green's character had, screwed over the brides. And, to the point that they like deserve death, like for what you did to me.
The way the bride describes it is she played a part in murdering 10 innocent people, including my unborn child or something. Yeah. But it's never specified how. But we just obviously from the opening saw how that ended with a bullet in her head. She was a part of that. So we understand that she's out for revenge. It's not till 2 that we understand the specifics of it.
Green's daughter walks in and kind of halts the fight because the bride understands that she doesn't want to fight and kill a mother like in front of her daughter, because that'll fuck someone up.
We never do learn the bride's backstory across all 2 movies, but she says she's a bad person, but it's little things like that that probably indicate maybe she's not so horrible, after all. I mean, like, but just as far as the knife fight, it's not important, but I just was going to say, like, it's not overly choreographed. It actually feels fast and vicious, which I want, like, it feels, and they're like trying to bait each other into, like, it's just a really well done knife fight.
It's not elegant.
No, I mean, they're like 2 wild cats, trying to like bait each other into making a move. And yeah, but the daughter shows up and they both put their knives away behind their back for her sake. So, and agree to fight at a later point.
But Vernita kind of goes back on that because she hides a gun in a cereal box and shoots at the bride. And then the bride reacts, dodges it, kicks a cereal bowl into the air, and then throws her knife into Vernita's heart and kills her in front of her daughter. So they tried not to do it, but they did it anyway, which I think is a theme you can try to prevent, or you can try to not be yourself, but eventually like the truth is going to come out, or like basically it's going to catch up to you. This is jumping ahead, but when Bill brings up the Superman thing and Clark Kent,
it's all going to come out in the open. She thought she could live the quiet life with a husband and this mundane existence in a record store. Yeah, her past caught up to her. It is who she is.
And then you think, even in the process of killing someone's mother, you think you could at least do it without showing it to her daughter. But even that, still finds its way. Like, you can't escape who she is.
Yeah, you can tell she's kind of actually upset by that, because that's interesting. God, that's so fucking obvious, and I didn't think about it when I was watching it. But I mean, that's really, that is, I think, a big idea there. Yeah, and I mean, I don't know, that the little girl must have been hiding around the corner the whole time. They told her to go upstairs, but she's just like there. I think that's set up for the potential volume 3, right? That this will be the girl that seeks her revenge 20 years later, if he ever does do volume 3, Oh, and she's named Nikita after, I can guarantee, fuck L out there. La Femme Nikita, the Luke Besson Girl with the Gun movie. So yeah, I guarantee, I know Tarantino's a fan of Luke Besson, so I'm sure that's why he named her that. But I guess she's been introduced to the adult world by seeing her mother killed. So
that's the end of chapter 1. You see her mark off a list of 5 names, and she had just marked off number 2, and above is already a name that's been marked off called Oreni Shi. It's kind of already spoilt for us that Oren is gonna die, but that's kind of not the point of the movie. The point of the movie is to have a fun time watching it, at least this first one. And then
yes, it's perfect for the spoiler alert podcast in that way.
So then chapter 2, a crime scene with Michael Parks, a sheriff, and his partner.
That was probably one of the best death scenes I've seen, just in From Dusk Till Dawn, where he gets shot in the head and his teeth start chattering. I'm like, that's horrible. Like, so something neurologically goes wrong, his teeth start like, I'm like, God, that was awful. That was like just a really violent, disturbing death in From Dusk Till Dawn. But anyway, that's him. So he brought Tarantino wrote the script for that, but Rodriguez directed, and Tarantino starred in From Dusk Till Dawn. But that'd be another one to maybe watch. So
yeah, Michael Parks, and it's kind of like one of the early bits in this movie that you see of like the Tarantino universe. They reuse actors. It's the same actors. Sometimes it's not the same character, but sometimes it kind of is.
Okay. Yeah, like Sam Jackson plays endless descendants of himself, right? Like, I mean,
yeah,
isn't that, yeah, it's some weird shit.
And the Vega brothers, like, yeah, that's a big one. That's legit.
Actually, that idea ties in with so a big inspiration for this was Hanzo the Razor, Hattori Hanzo. It's the same actor. And the idea with that is that it's not ever the same Hanzo. It's a different Hanzo, but his sensibilities are timeless, right? So it's like he's the embodiment. Like, okay, if anybody's played The Legend of Zelda, it's like Link. There's just always a Link. There's just always a Zelda. Like, that's kind of the Tarantino universe. I mean, well, actually, no, some descendants are assholes, and then some are okay. Whatever. It's confusing. But it's there's like a whole Wikipedia article on it you could probably look at. So
they show a little bit more of the crime scene. They're like, God damn, there's like 10 dead or 12 dead, including the bride and the groom. And they have like those really like raspy Southern accents, Texas accents.
Well, I like that. Yeah, you got the deputy like, oh, God damn. And he's like, don't you, not in the Lord's house. And then like later, Uma Thurman spits in his face. He's like, this tall drink of cocksucker ain't dead. It's like, after he's ridiculing the deputy for, that kind of language in the house of God. But it also tells you where his mind is at, because he's like, look at that angel hair, and like he's getting really into it, which is kind of creepy because Uma's laying there for all intents and purposes dead, little blood splattered angel. He's like getting really into it, and then she spits into his face. And then we learn that she's alive
when she's in the hospital bed, right after the sheriff and his partner like look at the scene he got spat on. Then L is who appears to be this other assassin, wears like this eye patch and a nurse's outfit.
It's a really great outfit. The trench coat. It's got like, it's the fashion in this movie is also, there's something to be said for it. But
she's in a sexy nurse outfit, and she's whistling, and it's like a very memorable whistle too. Like it'll get stuck in your head.
I think it's called Twisted Nerve is the theme. But yeah, it gets stuck in your head. So
she was almost going to euthanize the bride, but then she got a phone call from Bill, who's this, again, mysterious voice, but this time we kind of see his hand like with a sword telling her not to kill the bride.
It's his explanation that, like, as whatever organization they are, if they kill her in her sleep, that's going to make them look bad. I mean, they are assassins, but they're not that kind of assassin. But you can tell Elle is pissed off about this. She's clearly Bill's new girlfriend. That becomes a lot more relevant in volume 2, but she wants the bride out of the picture is the gist that we get in volume 1, and we can kind of surmise why.
At this point in time, the baby's been taken out of the bride, So we're just questioning whether the baby made it or not.
The first volume, you think the child's dead.
And then we jump to 4 years later, and the bride is in the hospital bed, and then she rises up, inhales really quick. We get a freeze frame, and then we get the voiceover of Bill saying, "This is me at my most masochistic." Because the last time she had any kind of visions in her head was that moment. So she woke up and right there.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty cool effect. And like, there's even like overly sized gun and bullet shot like directly at the camera.
Oh, yeah, it's moving in slow mo.
It looks hilarious. I love it. She starts getting these flashbacks. One of the flashbacks she gets right away is her like male nurse. His name is Buck, and like she gets these flashbacks that he like has raped her when she was comatose, and then we actually see him sell her off, like pimp her out to this one guy.
Like this is you have the pawn shop scene in Pulp Fiction. You have you always just throw some fucked up shit like this into the middle of the movie where everything goes to the worst place possible. So he's giving this guy the rundown, which obviously implies that this has been par for the course for the past 4 years, pimping out the bride and she's pretending to be asleep the whole time. And she learns horribly that her reproductive system isn't there anymore, right? So you see her learn this, she's gulping as she's listening to this whole conversation about what's been going on for the past 4 years. Like it's a subtle thing, but you can actually see her like try to choke it. Anyway, she bites a dude's throat out if it's of any consolation. First his tongue and then his throat. So he suffers a bit, and then Buck walks in, she slashes his Achilles, and then starts to interrogate him by slamming his head in the doorway. Where's Bill? Where's Bill? I was also gonna say it's a surprise. It's one of the only bloodless deaths in a Tarantino movie. Like there should actually probably be a lot more blood pooling around his ankle and probably his head from being smashed so many times in the doorway. I never thought I'd complain about a lack of blood in a Tarantino movie, but this might be the one death. But yeah, Buck gets what's coming to him. She gets herself into a wheelchair, rolls out into the parking lot. She pulls his keys out of his pocket, labeled Pussy Wagon, so kind of hard to miss, and which explains where the Pussy Wagon came from. Climbs into the back seat, but she's been in a coma for 4 years, so she can't move really, so she lays in the back of the truck for, as it turns out, 13 hours. I'm like, where were the cops? I mean, I know it's graveyard shift at the hospital, but surely somebody might have noticed the 2 dead guys, but apparently not. And then over the course of the Tarantino's foot fetish thing. So we get a nice slow zoom on Uma Thurman's feet, and while she's trying to wiggle her big toe.
So right after she does the wiggle your big toe thing, it becomes chapter 3, which is the origin of Oren. And we kind of give her backstory, and her backstory was very similar to kind of the backstory we see with Green's daughter from the beginning, where her parents are killed in front of her at an early age, and she's seen a lot of fucked up shit.
Her father, he puts up a valiant fight, but she's hiding under the bed the whole time. He collapses to the ground in front of her, and then he's whispering something to her, and he's stabbed in the head. And then we see somebody who bears a likeness of a young David Carradine, right? So I think I really like the idea that might actually be Bill. That was not the one who ordered her father's death, but the kind of lackey carrying it out, And so whether she's aware of this and maybe is planning her own revenge or not, I don't know. But it's an interesting idea. In any case, there's definitely in the Oren section, the idea of the cycle of revenge, because ultimately by the end of the section, she victimizes innocence in the same way that she was victimized at the start of the sequence, just to get just fun fact shit out of the way or whatever. So for one thing, I would say that this came out right about the time that I think this added a lot of legitimacy to anime, coming out in 2003 or so. And it's just not common to see an animated sequence in a live action film. I mean, the only other one I can think of is Alan Parker's Pink Floyd The Wall, where you had a lot of animated sequences. But have you heard about the Whole Bloody Affair, cut of the
Yep.
movie? Yeah, so apparently this now production IG did the animation for this. They've done so much stuff. Like Ghost in the Shell, Standalone Complex, just a bunch of things. So supposedly the sequence is supposed to go on for 30 minutes. Tarantino said it was fully animated. A lot of people call bullshit. I don't know if he's just trying to mythologize the Whole Bloody Affair, because it's like, I'm kind of wondering why would they just sit on that, but he said they financed it themselves, and so it's like maybe they can't really release it, since it was a passion project. And they just supposedly there are 30 minutes to this animated sequence, which was also done to get around censors, because it was the violence in the sequence would have gotten hit with an NC-17. That comes up later in the movie at the end, where he was going to get hit with a NC-17 with the house.
When do you think they're actually going to release a Whole Bloody Affair, and would it coincide with Kill Bill 3?
That would be awesome. I wish because I used to keep up on this in the early 2000s, so I was like looking all over the place. I was looking I thought I saw bootlegs, and then people are saying no, that's bullshit. Like, there does not exist a bootleg cut anywhere on the internet. He only showed it exclusively at certain screenings that he hosted, and from those descriptions, it's actually not that different. He just basically combines the two movies. There's a bit more violence, like Sophia gets both her arms cut off in the Whole Bloody Affair, which was too sadistic or violent for the MPAA. And just a few other things. Obviously, the intro to part 2 is cut out because they just go straight into each other. And obviously, the black and white thing is totally gone, so it's all in color in the Whole Bloody Affair, the House of Leaves fight. But nothing drastic that I've heard of outside of the supposed, and this is Tarantino himself saying that the supposed animated 30-minute Oren Oshii sequence, which would be really cool to see. But I do question, like, why haven't we seen the surface after almost a decade? Does it really exist, or is he just mythologizing it? But it'd be really cool if it does exist. But yeah, so that's the Whole Bloody Affair. I would love to see it. And he's kind of maintained that he always wanted Uma Thurman to come back after like 20 years. So it's almost like a Train Spotting 2 thing, where he's like waiting for the time to be right, which we're approaching now. But then, there's kind of like bad blood between them, which didn't even, like, I was never aware of until a few years ago, but I guess it makes sense because he never recast her, and the car accident from Kill Bill Volume 2 or whatever. And then some stuff with Harvey. He wanted to do it with her after about 20 years, and he wanted to cast her daughter, Eva Hawke, I think is her name.
Yep.
Who would be about the right age now, to play her daughter. But outside of that, he also considered doing anime versions. If he could never do them live action, he thought he wanted to do 3 and 4 as an anime, I think, which I'll take that over nothing. That'd be really cool. Just to get something,
I would also just like to quick say that Ava Hawke was also in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. She was one of the Manson. She was the one that turned around and got it back in the car.
Oh yeah. The exact moment that you're like, oh wait, what the fuck's going on? Because like we're deviating from events.
Oren, like, also, since she was a girl, like, just became like this super crazy assassin. And in the anime, we see her shooting at these like politicians and whatnot, like high level assassinations. And then we also see her beating up the bride. We switch back to Wiggle Your Big Toe, and it wiggles a little bit. And then we cut to black, and then it's chapter 4, The Man from Okinawa. This chapter begins with the bride walking into the sushi bar and talking to someone who presumably just looks like just a sushi cook. There's a pretty unimportant argument going on between this character and like the dishwasher or the other worker. Like, they're just having an argument about working. The bride is kind of saying she's there on vacation or pretending to be someone she's not. Eventually the conversation turns to where he knows that she knows that he is Hattori Hanzo. And Hattori Hanzo, he makes like the best steel samurai swords in the world. and they're like all one of a kind. They go up into the upper level of the tavern or wherever they are, and he tells the bride though that he's no longer making things that kill human beings because he doesn't want to bring more death, even though he's the best sword maker in the world. So he said that he's done, he's not going to do it anymore. And then he asked, like, who is it that you are going to kill?
Well, it's kind of like a Voldemort thing. She doesn't say it outright. She's like, I have vermin to kill. And she's like, must be very big vermin to need a Hattori Hanzo sword. And she's like, the biggest.
And then he draws out Bill in the condensation on a window.
Right. And then she scribbles it out. So there's another thing, and because you alluded to it in volume 2, where it's like you have Michael Madsen's character, who was obviously once this great assassin living as, well, killing him would be a mercy in Kill Bill volume 2. And then you have Hattori Hanzo, who was once great, but is now just, like you said, a sushi chef. You know, it's so it's all hiding underneath the surface of everyday life. You know, the mundane is, you know, I think that's kind of the world of Kill Bill. It's all underworld, behind closed doors. We have all these secret assassins, kind of like John Wick is done now, but not as ridiculous, because literally all the hobos in the subways are assassins in John Wick. Everybody's a fucking assassin in John Wick. The whole population of New York is an assassin in John Wick. But anyway, yeah, that whole sequence where, yeah, he's very proud of his work and the reverent music, and she's just getting a feel for the, I mean, it's a great sequence, but there's not much to talk. It's just one of those things where it's like you watch it rather than, you know, but there's a gravity to a Hattori Hanzo blade. It's a big deal. And
yeah, and they have a whole ceremony for it. They have a whole ceremony.
Yeah, right. So
after that ceremony, we go into chapter 5, which is Showdown at the House of Blue Leaves.
The longest chapter, I think.
Yes, it's the longest chapter. Now, to begin this chapter, Oren works her way to the top of the Japanese underworld. In this scene, we bring up that she has both American and Chinese heritage, and that's like frowned upon in Japan. So yeah, in the voiceover, they mentioned that it was only brought up once about her heritage to her face, and this is what happened. And we see the scene, and she cuts the guy's head off, and it, you know, spouts 8 feet in the air.
Volcanic. It is a volcanic eruption of blood. It's absurd.
The bride arrives in Tokyo on an airplane to the sound of the flight of the honeybees. There's a few long takes here that basically give you the dimensions of the room.
Yeah, she's scouting it out.
You see that Oren is at the top here. It goes around. We follow Sophie, and then we follow Sophie into the bathroom. And in the bathroom, Sophie's captured. She actually has a flashback that Sophie was there that day too. Right. She hadn't met her before, I don't think, but she was on the phone with somebody while she's getting the shit kicked out of her. She knows right away that Sophie is going to be probably a person of relative importance, and B, someone she wants to kill anyway. So she grabs her, and then she has her sword behind Sophie, pushes her out into the crowd. She says, "You and I have unfinished business." And then there's kind of a standoff. The music's building. Oren sees that the bride is alive, and that's a shock.
But she's awake, you know?
Yeah.
And actually, yeah, like you said, Oren's the first on this hit list. So this is probably news. You know, she's getting the hard news, being the first one here on the hit list.
And then it pretty much goes right into the bride cutting one of Sophie's arms off. And then she's just bleeding and contorting. And
volcanic.
Crazy 88s, which are, you know, the Yakuza that fight with Oren, fight for Oren, surround the bride. And she's just slaughtering them. It's just gonna be a waste of time explaining all that happens, because it is a very long sequence of fighting. But it's after awesome. This first slaughter of just limbs going every which way, people getting their heads cut off, like split in half, fucking Jokerized. Like,
yeah, like you said, there's probably no point to even try to describe it. How about it is just awesome and gory as all hell and glorious. So yeah.
And then after that first wave, Go-Go, who was at the table when she cut the dude's head off, Go-Go's like this schoolgirl outfit, fucking Japanese stereotype. So Go-Go comes down the stairs with a fucking, what do you call it? Like a fucking maze?
I wrote it down. It's a meteor hammer. It's Chinese weapon, hammer? A meteor hammer. Yeah, that's
okay. So, she has a meteor hammer, which is a big.
It looks like a mace, but it's like it's on a chain and you twirl it. So
it's a pretty difficult fight. Like she almost gets the bride strangled and has it like tied with a knot around a post behind the bride and is twisting and twisting. But then the bride takes a fucking piece of a table with nails sticking out of it and gets her in the head. For one moment, Oren unsheathes her sword ready to fight, but then she hears the motorcycles outside with reinforcements, and it's Johnny Moe, who's her like first in command.
Then we get into the second fight. I think that's the one that's censored. Or
in the second wave, she kind of just goes into this mode where she kind of almost break dances, but she's basically just cutting everybody's legs off.
Both sequences are totally awesome. You get like this intermission, and the whole while you have Oren looking down from above, where it's basically like, you earn an audience with me, right? You know, like, yeah, you're not worthy until you go through everything I've accumulated over the past 4 years. Then I'll see you, you know. And the bride does. She hacks and slashes through all of it. So
one of the things she does too is she kills Johnny Moe, sends him over the ledge into a pool of blood, basically. Then she goes behind the Oren's like kind of more private area, where we kind of just see silhouettes of her killing more people. And then the last of the crazy 88s is there shaking and is with his sword, and she just like slowly cuts the sword shorter and shorter, and then just spanks him and like tells him to go home to her.
No match for Krenz.
Because remember, guys, this is a Mother's Day special. So there you have it. Then the bride tells everyone that's still alive that they can go out with their lives, but leave your limbs. They belong to me now. Which is a fucking badass.
Fucking like one of the most. Yeah, I was gonna say it's one of the most badass things I think I've ever heard. So, Jesus, but yeah. So then I think to the big fight between her and Oren.
She opens up the door to the garden, and it's all snow. It's just a very different shot and a very nice visual change. Honestly, it just works really well for it. And it's a very kind of slow, almost like respectful fight compared to the others. Oren asks about the sword the bride has, and she says it's a Hattori Hanzo sword. She proved it. And then it's like, and then the fight kind of begins and the music kind of clicks up and it goes.
Oh yeah, well, I think this. So the original score is by RZA or whatever, you know, from Wu-Tang Clan, and just so I would say it's hard to say of any Tarantino movie like which has the best selection of you know, music, but as far as an original score, I think the RZA's soundtrack to this is probably the best of the Tarantino film of originally produced music for the movie, you know. I'd say Kill Bill probably takes that because everything else I think he's just using tracks from you know, I mean,
Ennio Morricone won the Oscar for Hateful Eight, though.
But even those tracks were rejects from The Thing. That's how good he is. He won an Oscar for his rejects from The Thing that were never used in the actual movie. It's just like the B-side shit. They're like, you know, even that's Oscar worthy.
And then the bride actually gets wounded in the fight, and then the music stops, and then she wounds Oren back. And then Oren looks at her and says, "Come at me with everything you have." Then they fight, and basically what ends up happening is the bride scalps Oren.
The way it's shot though is really clever because it's like it's cut off right where she's cut off, and then we just see like the blood trickle down, and she's like, that really was a Hattori Hanzo. Sorry, it pans up and you see like the whole top of her head's off. It's kind of like Shawshank. It's like, I'd like to think that the last thing that went through old Ren Oshi's head, besides that Hattori Hanzo blade, was how did the bride ever get the better of her? So probably the biggest inspiration for Kill Bill would be Lady Snowblood, and the last fight takes place in literal snow. O-Ren kind of does a shuffle, which is totally from Lady Snowblood. She moves with like this sort of delicate, almost like geisha-like shuffle or whatever, totally Lady Snowblood. And then there's a big sort of sword fight, there's a two-story fight, kind of like the House of Leaves, not quite as epic as House of Leaves, but you can see some clear inspirations. It's not like a rip-off or anything, but it's obviously inspired.
So Sophie is actually left with a message for Bill. And it makes sense because you had mentioned earlier that in a more extreme cut in the whole bloody affair, we find out that Sophie loses both of her limbs. You can kind of sort of see that in her hospital gown, how like she kind of doesn't have shoulders. The bride is on an airplane to go to America to kill Green. And she crosses off O-Ren, and then there's number 2, Vernita Green. So she's going back to America on an airplane. And then we're cut back to Bill in the hospital talking to Sophie, who's crying and feels ashamed that she let this happen to her and it all went to shit, basically. And she had to leave a message for Bill. And that message was that she's going to kill everyone that was responsible for it. And then Bill asks her, is she aware her daughter is still alive? And then we have this beautiful fucking music cut from an Ennio Morricone song. It's just perfect. You just have to listen to it. So that was the end of volume 1. As a quick intermission, let's just talk a little bit about Tarantino. Quentin Tarantino, he kind of started out as this movie theater usher and like in porno theaters too. And
did he do porno theaters?
I think he worked in porno theaters for a little bit.
Right.
He also worked at video stores and was a nonstop talker about movies. He was kind of like a savant. A lot of his movies are referential. Like Kill Bill 1 is referential to Kung Fu movies. Volume 2 is more referential to Westerns. So it's like Kung Fu and Western combined for Kill Bill.
Right, yeah, it's east,
very unique.
East, west, and the other way around, it's really cool.
So then in 2004, the sequel to Kill Bill Volume 1 was released. This is Kill Bill Volume 2, obviously. Now, Kill Bill Volume 2 begins in a similar way as Volume 1, where there's like this black and white prologue and she's driving and she's on her way to Bill. That's like the next house she's going to. So they already put they once again put the end at the beginning. Tarantino's non-linear way. And then the first chapter is the massacre at the Two Pines. Now, this is a wedding rehearsal with Tommy, who was the groom at her wedding, at the bride's wedding. And she was kind of annoyed with Tommy, like just being at the wedding a little bit. So she needed to get some air. And
Maury's parents, but yeah. Right. Yeah.
Maybe annoyed was too strong a word, but
she is with the in-laws because they're, they obviously don't approve. And so it's kind of that whole cliche, kind of normal, really, like, the fucking in-laws. So everything seems quaint and normal. And then things get very bizarre and surreal with the flute playing. Yeah.
Right. She hears a flute and follows it outside. And it's kind of a scene from like The Searchers, where it's like a frame within a frame. It was kind of a famous tip of the cap to John Ford. And then she walks outside and finds Bill, who is played by David Carradine. He has family members who are also in a bunch of movies, like The Grapes of Wrath, Revenge of the Nerds, bunch of stuff. They have a really big family.
Oh
And
yeah, and then you got Kung
Nashville,
Fu.
stuff like that.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, that'd be one of the more famous things. So
And
but
Kung
yeah.
Fu, obviously, for David Carradine. But they have a conversation that kind of reveals that, you know, she kind of tried to step away from the assassin life and sort of went into a direction of like normalcy, like trying to be normal.
Well, you do see that actually for like all of the Vipers, like you had Vernita Green, you know, it's just kind of so in a way, I guess you could almost say that the bride's, well, not hypocritical, but well, there's a scene at the end of volume 2, remember, where she finds out she's pregnant and she's, you know, the other assassin backs off, you know, but you know, but then she says to Vernita Green in volume 1 that, you know, nothing you've done in the past 4 years, which actually timeline wise it'd probably be 5, including getting knocked out, because she'd probably be pregnant at the same time the bride was, is going to change that we have unfinished business. Oh yeah, she's trying to step away, have a normal life. You see that with all the assassins. Bill's kind of retired in Mexico. His brother is living in some burnt out trailer. They're all living really mundane existences. And I think Elle might be the only one who's still active of them by the looks of things. So
I guess Oren was like,
oh yeah,
building
right.
kind of
so,
building
yeah,
an army, so maybe she's an exception, but that's like the first kind of hint we see of her that she wanted out of the life, you know what I mean, to begin with, the life of an assassin. And he even at that point kind of makes a comment like this isn't you, like this doesn't look like you. He doesn't exactly say that, but he kind of says that. Then he steps aside and makes a signal for the rest of the Vipers outside, and the Vipers close into the church, and we kind of have a cutaway, or a like really far like cutaway of just the sound of gunfire inside the church and screaming. And then we move on from there to the lonely grave of Paula Schultz, which is chapter 7. Now this chapter starts off with Bud, who is a character we haven't seen too much of. But Bud is played by Michael Madsen, who played Vic Vega in Reservoir Dogs. And he's been a good character actor in a lot of movies. And in this, he's legitimately like good. Like he actually makes you care for like a rotten son of a bitch. Like,
yeah, because it's weird because he certainly has a sadistic streak, kind of like his Reservoir Dogs character, but well, like, and his existence is just so sad and defeated at this point that like I think killing him would be a mercy. Like the real revenge should just be letting him go on living out this horrible existence in a trailer. But you know, working in some titty bar as a bouncer, and you know, and his boss is just a total dick. Like, I mean, it's like yeah, there's that line where like the stripper's like, the toilet backed up, there's shitty water everywhere. He's like, go clean it up. You know, like it's just like his life sucks. So, but anyway, yeah, so he's a sympathetic character in a way, you know, even though he's a killer and whatever. And he seems more willing to meet that head on. You know, where he kind of acknowledges his role. So he kind of walked away from Bill too. Bill seems to have taken it better with Bud than he did with the bride, though, because he's still alive. Yeah, I don't know, but they have a strained relationship.
and that's a good point to bring up, because Bill had warned Bud that Beatrix is coming and that Beatrix is going to kill him. And at that point, that's when like the music, like Ennio Morricone's music again, and then like Bud, and he's like, you know, we deserve to die for what we did for what we did to her. But then again, so
he does make the he makes the point that, you know, she's a killer too, though. So we'll just see what happens, right? You know, and it's
that's a great scene, and it's like a character that could have been like under a different director a lot of times, could have been, you know, just kind of an afterthought, you know. But it was but he's fleshed out character.
Yeah. And well, and he's the other thing is that he's very Western too. So like, and that kind of introduces the much more Western. There's a Western aesthetic that's being introduced. And
there's a Western aesthetic in the bride scene at the beginning.
Oh yeah, in the first one too.
Wedding, Yeah, the rehearsal scene at the beginning. And it kind of just carries throughout. They go to Mexico at one point. So it's
Mhm.
it's very much so that the first volume was a kung fu movie and the second volume was a Western.
Yeah, but we do get a bit more of the kung fu with the Pai Mei sequence, so it's, but
Yeah.
just like there was a hint of the Western in the first one, there's a hint of the Eastern still in the second one. So yeah.
Bud had also told Bill at this point that he had pawned off his Hattori Hanzo sword for like $600.
No,
And
even less. It was like 200,
oh
250,
yeah, that's
something
right.
just nothing.
And then Bill was like, it was priceless.
Like,
And he's like, not in El Paso, it ain't. And at that point, Bill left him with a Hattori Hanzo sword
Mhm.
because he didn't have one or whatever.
Well, yeah, well, and it was engraved. I think it was like, to my brother Bill, the only man I ever loved. And Hattori Hanzo swords, as we established in Volume 1, are a big deal. Those are not easy to obtain. They're, like he says, priceless. So that's a big deal.
He wanted Bud to be able to defend himself with Beatrix. So the night he comes back from the titty bar, he kind of stops by his trailer and lights a cigarette and kind of seems to notice something like behind him, but doesn't really make a fuss about it. And goes
Yeah, he
into
doesn't
his trailer.
photograph.
And then we see Beatrix pull up a ski mask, and she walks right up, and all of a sudden, like, the door flies open because he just shot a shotgun into her fucking chest. It wasn't full of gunshot, it was full of salt, which hurts like hell, but is not
Well, they
mortally.
call that less lethal. It certainly
Yes.
still has the killing potential, but yeah,
Yes.
they don't say non-lethal with, like, what do they call it? The beanie bag things, because it still can kill you. So they're like less lethal in the military or SWAT or whatever.
Right.
So
Yeah, that would be full of rock salt. A shot full of rock salt to the chest would really, really, really fucking hurt. Especially for her. So she's kind of helpless. He ties her up, gets a buddy, and gets her in the truck, and then basically ends up leaving her with a flashlight. But the way he does it is by threatening to mace her eyeballs out, basically.
The important thing, though, is he calls Elle and lets her know that the bride is still alive. And remember, they work it out because Elle wants to get Elle was going to pay him for his Hattori Hanzo sword, but she added on that she wanted the bride to suffer, and then she'd buy his. Or no, wait, shit, what was it? Elle wanted the bride's sword, right? Not his. And so, yeah, the part of that negotiation is that the bride has to suffer to the max, and then Elle will show up, pay for the bride's sword, and they worked it out like that. So, but like otherwise, like what you said, yeah, he leaves her with a flashlight, and
he leaves her with a flashlight and ties her up and closes the coffin on her. Says, this is for breaking my brother's heart. And then she's buried, or you can see it getting darker and darker, and the initially really loud crushing
dirt.
of the dirt above her, then that gets quieter and quieter as you go higher and higher. It's just
it's an intense sequence. They probably shovel her over a little quicker than they would in actuality, but it feels long and intense,
And then the scene cuts away from that point, and we'll return to it later. But we go into chapter 8, which is the cruel tutelage of Pai Mei. It starts off at a campfire scene with Beatrix and Bill, and it's like the first time we see them in a point of the relationship where they're still good, where they still kind of like each other.
He tells her a story about, I have this written down in my notes, where it's about Pai Mei's kind of just temperament or whatever, and he just sort of impulsively kills the shit out of a monk for not returning his greeting. And I think Bill loves this story. It's weird because even Beatrix seems to be all like a kid, almost enamored by this story, but Bill seems to have taken inspiration from it in terms of like his own temperament. Like he because later on it's like maybe I overreacted, but he just kind of like lets his feelings drive him, and he impulsively, kind of just slaughtered the love of his life and everyone that she held dear in a fit of romantic jealousy. He's like, maybe I overreacted. But yeah, I think that comes out of this story that he's telling her about Pai Mei and how he just kind of kills a monk just because he feels like it.
At the campfire, Pai Mei explains how he kills the guy that looked at him the wrong way. And he did it with a 5-finger, 5-point palm exploding heart technique, where he hit different pressure points on the body, and you didn't die there, but you took 5 steps and you fell to the ground because your heart exploded.
Because the monk made him angry.
And the next day after that campfire story that you just described,
yeah,
he drops her off at Pai Mei's palace and like leaves her there, and now she's gonna be stuck with Pai Mei for, I don't know, months, maybe years, who knows.
Yeah,
of just learning and basically starting by like carrying water up the stairway, but then like he also like just kicks the shit out of her and almost breaks her arm off and gives her like threatens her, saying like, it's my arm now, because he was gonna like chop it the fuck off. And now that's part of his training, is he's like, you're gonna do whatever I want you to do with that arm. And he makes her do like a 5-inch punch or whatever they call it, where you put your fingers against a wooden board and just punch and punch and punch. And early on, like her hands were all like fucked up, but then she got better and better and better and better. And then we cut
the whole thing's like a montage,
Yes, it's a montage.
Like,
It's a training montage, and he's getting slowly and slowly more proud. And he does this with his beard. And then like at one point she starts to eat rice with her hands, but they're too sore. So she throws their chopsticks to the side and starts eating like a dog. And then he knocks the bowl out of her hands and makes her do it again like a person. And then she does, and like he's kind of proud of that. So we get that little bit, that like kind of quick chapter, which the scenes are drawn out and really cool, but like we get that quick chapter of her training experience.
When earning his respect over that, because Bill sets it up by saying he hates women, he hates Americans, and like, so you're in for it, have fun, I'll pick you up in a few years. So like, yeah, but she does earn his respect, which comes back in this next scene, I think, with Elle.
And then we cut back to Beatrix in the coffin. This is my favorite scene in like all of Kill Bill, and one of my favorite scenes I can think of, where you have La Reina by Ennio Morricone playing, which is like my favorite fucking music. And you see her turn the light on, which is, like pretty symbolic for, hope and all that shit. She starts to work off her boots and kind of work like some kind of like holster within one of her boots up to her, because there's a knife in there. And she works up her legs and then is able to reach it and then grabs the knife. And that's like at this point like a lifesaver. So she starts working at her wrists, and then she doesn't get it right away, but she starts doing it a way that's going to be really efficient. And then she gets the rope loose, and then she spots the place on the coffin ceiling of where best to punch. She focuses in and says, "Okay, Pai Mei, here I come." And then she just starts punching the ceiling of it, and she's bleeding, but she eventually punches all the way through it, and then it breaks. Dirt piles in. This part's the unlikely part, where she just kind of swims out. But
yeah,
but you know what, the movie's earned it to this point. So like she just,
yeah, I'll take it. It also looks like she's buried way more than like 6 feet, because that's like a hell of a climb from what we see. But maybe it's a metaphor, whatever. It's awesome. It's so like, but
and she pops out of the grave of Paula Scholes and walks over into a diner covered in dirt and asks for a glass of water. And then we enter chapter 9, which is Elle and I. Elle comes in on a convertible and pulls up to Bud's trailer. They start talking. They have like margaritas, and then they basically do a money exchange. She has a briefcase full of money for the sword. She grabs the sword and is like, it's just a shame that she had to be killed by you. He gets bit by a black mamba in the briefcase of money and falls to the ground and starts like convulsing. And then she explains like a bunch of facts about the black mamba. So it's kind of like Beatrix gets the kill because the black mamba did kill Bud, which is kind of funny in its own way, even though Elle killed him.
There's another thing though too, where it's like, it's, you know, well, so you have that sequence where Bill calls up Elle in volume 1, and, you know, it's like, this thing would lower us. And so, and Elle obviously wants to be Bill's favorite and is in competition with Beatrix because she knows that Beatrix still has his heart and everything. So she's just parroting Bill. She's like, you know, you're the snake, not me. You know, she deserved better. She should have died at my hands because she sees herself as worthy. And, you know, and she's trying to take everybody out of Bill's way. You know, Bud, his brother, who she knows he loves, you know, Beatrix, so that it's just her and Bill, and then maybe he'll truly love her, I think is the idea, you know?
So he's convulsing and then he dies. Elle grabs the money, opens up the door, but then it gets kicked in because Beatrix is there, and then they start fighting. And it's kind of similar almost, except just add swords to the fight in Raising Arizona, where it's in a trailer, and a big part of the fight is how cramped trailers are. So like they scratch their hands on the top.
For anybody that plays those video games where like they have this commitment to realism, where it's like, if you're in a cramped corridor, your sword will get hung on the wall. It's like the most infuriating shit ever, right? It's like that. So we see that sequence where like she tries to get her sword out, but she can't in the hall. And, you know, so just, yeah, it's a claustrophobic fight.
At one point in the fight, when there's kind of this standoff, right? Beatrix says, "What was it that you said to Pai Mei that made him so mad to take your eye out?" She said, "You were a stubborn old fool." That's what Elle had said. And then Beatrix says, "Oh, you shouldn't have said that," or big mistake there. And then that's when Elle reveals that, "Well, I murdered that stubborn old fool." And then this is news to Beatrix. So Elle is like, "Yeah, I killed your master.
Now I'm gonna kill you." Yeah, she's, you know, just the camera zoom, and it's but it does show that, like, I mean, so, you know, Beatrix sort of showed him by living up to his expectations and taking that all on the chin, you know. I mean, if you want to eat like a dog, then you can sleep outside like a dog and eat off the floor like a dog then, or do you want to be here? You know, and she took all of that and she endured it, and Elle took the shortcut and just assassinated him. So, you know, like, as revenge. So yeah, she's never really been worthy of Beatrix.
And then Beatrix says, "Bitch, you don't have a future." And I forgot.
Which is a fucking badass line.
And then they fight and their swords get caught again. And then and then Beatrix almost kind of realizes that they're really close together with just the sword, like the sword, like just kind of being stuck like that.
Interlocking.
So she plucks out her other eye.
Which Pai Mei taught her. And that's like Pai Mei's revenge after death, you know, because he taught that to Beatrix and not her, because she, you know, so.
Yeah, it was weird because pretty much in one scene, or at least one set piece, there's like two different kinds of passed off revenge, where there's a
like you said,
revenge from
with
Elle
the
Black Mamba, and then from Beatrix to Pai Mei. And then the chapter ends, and the final chapter, which is called the last chapter, is titled Face to Face. And it's kind of funny the way it goes. So she's driving through, she talks to Michael Parks, who's in brown face, which is, you know, it's interesting for sure.
Well, he has this droopy-eyed, like drunk, drugged out, like thing where he's like, yeah. I mean, it's just, it's really, yeah. I mean, but maybe controversial. I don't know.
I just think it's at the very least worth mentioning. And then moving on from.
He's doing the Peter Sellers thing in any case, like Doctor Strange, which is hard to do. Where it's like I had to go, wait, it is fucking Michael Parks, like so.
Basically, this guy knows Bill and directs her where to go. Kind of like the last like small obstacle or the last like person you have to meet to finish your quest. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that kind of thing.
And this
like,
whole thing does feel like a journey. The what is Lonely Shepherd theme really gives you this kind of sense of like you've been through a lot. It's moving. I don't know, but she asks, or no, she doesn't even ask. He's like, do you want to know why? I'm just going to tell you where Bill is because Bill's like a son to me. But I'll tell you where he is. And you know why? Because Bill wants to see you. And she's like, oh, I find that hard to believe. It's like, no, I am a romantic, as he's talking about like cutting the faces of, he's like, I would not have killed you. I would have, I would have just cut your face. Like, but he sees himself as an old romantic. And he's like, no, I can tell that Bill, he wants to see you again. So I'm going to give that gift to him and I'm going to send you his way.
She enters his complex, opens the doors are open. She really has nothing holding her back on the way. There's no guards or anything that are like doing anything about her being there.
Right.
And Bill probably doesn't need guards. So that's probably part of it. But
yeah, I do think we see her like kind of sneaking around too, around the perimeter.
And when she opens the door, she walks through kind of this patio area and turns around the corner, and all of a sudden, like she has her sword out, and all of a sudden, like a little girl says, "Bang, bang, mommy," with like a squirt gun or a toy gun, and then Bill has a toy gun too. The look on her face just of seeing her daughter,
totally disarmed.
Which is why it's a Mother's Day special. She just plays along with the game at that point. Like she reacts to like theatrically playing dead, acting like everything's normal, kind of.
Yeah, Beatrix is always quick on the update. I mean, she takes in a lot of information very quick, like the whole Buck scene where she learns that she can't reproduce anymore. You can see her gulping, but she keeps her cool in that scene. Like she's quick, so she reacts. Yeah, she keeps or with Fernita Green and her daughter.
Yeah.
Actually, it's kind of a similar scene to that, really, where she puts her sword away for the sake of her daughter. But yeah, she's quick on the uptake.
And then we pretty much pour into like a 45-minute conversation to end the film in such an action-packed film, and it ends with a 45-minute conversation. I think that's like an underratedly extremely hard thing to pull off, and they did.
I wrote that.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I no, it is. It's because that sounds dreadful to anybody. Like that sounds horrible, and it's so good that you don't notice. I paused it a couple of times when I was watching. I'm like, oh my god, there are like 30 minutes left. 25. It's going by so quickly that I'm like, how the fuck is there a whole, like? I mean, I thought we were at the end, but all the dialogue is so compelling. It just it flashes by.
The audience is so almost immune to sword fights and shit like that at this point, that it's like a really nice break, actually.
It like on every level, when you stop and think about it, shouldn't work, and it does. And it's almost hard to pinpoint, because like it reminds me of Seven Psychopaths, where like Colin Farrell's character's like, maybe I'm just gonna have all these characters sit in a desert and talk about their feelings. And then you had oh shit, what's his name? I love him. It's got to end on a shootout. What the fuck are you doing? But yeah, it's like that's the lamest shit. And you do see that with a lot of these revenge movies where like they kind of try to subvert the ending, because otherwise it's obviously predictable that they get the revenge. So they always kind of try to confuse it, or sometimes they don't get the revenge at all. And I think that's lame too, because it's like, I love revenge movies. I do want to see them. It's totally unsatisfying to not see that happen, but at the same, like Kill Bill, it's both. Like it just takes the time to say all the things that most movies wouldn't say, but then surprisingly it actually says them well.
So the daughter's name is BB, and they make, and Bill's making them like sandwiches with like PB&J or whatever, and just like cutting off the crust and kind of being like, he's still a fucked up dad, but like he seems like a fucked up dad that can at least go through the motions, like not an idiot. And then,
Right.
which is endearing to see. Even just making a sandwich, I don't know, maybe making a sandwich isn't much, but
Well, I suppose in a way it's kind of like maybe he's trying to show that off to Beatrix, right? Because she wanted to leave for that kind of domesticated life, and he's like showing her maybe what she was missing out on. See, I can be a dad, you know, right? Like you didn't have to run off.
That's probably exactly what's running through his head. But they tell a story about life and death because BB learned about life and death, because she basically lied to him saying that a goldfish had jumped out of its bowl and gotten squished on the rug, and then she stepped on it on accident. But then she told the truth, which was that she took it out and stepped on it, and then it wasn't flopping anymore. And it's like a weird fucked up lesson about death that's really fucking toxic, but also interesting.
Well, you can see that that's probably what the bride was trying to move away from, right?
Beatrix takes BB upstairs to watch movies, and
well, it's
watching,
Shogun
like,
Assassin, which is Lone Wolf and Cub, the first one, edited. So it goes under, that was the original American release's title, was Shogun Assassin. So that came up again, but yeah.
BB falls asleep watching the movie, so Beatrix tucks her in and she walks down the stairs, and then I think you can really get into this part of it too. So they start talking about Clark Kent. He brings up superheroes.
I love all the dialogue. It is great.
Yes.
It's nothing. It's just, you should watch it for yourself, because I'll just throw it on for you.
This is kind of a scene where we recommend that you watch it for yourself, because it's really in the art of the dialogue. But Bill explains to her, did you ever get interested in superheroes? Because Superman was my favorite. And this is why. Because when Bruce Wayne wants to become a superhero, he becomes Batman. And, Peter Parker becomes Spider-Man. But Superman disguises himself into being human because he was always a superhero. He brought up, what is it that Superman sees in human beings to copy one? He sees cowardice. He's weak.
Well, basically he's a dork. Clark Kent's a dork, and that's right. What you were trying to be. You were trying to integrate when you were something special, like you were trying to settle for less than what you were. You were extraordinary, so I think was kind of the idea of that.
That's exactly the idea. And he's like, you should have just stayed with me. And
that might even be the idea of the lonely grave. See, I know I'm reaching with that, but she could have just been some lonely anonymous grave. But she's extraordinary. She climbs out of that fucking grave. She's like a living mythological
being.
I don't know, creature. Yeah, I mean, so.
And I think that's kind of how Tarantino views movies too. You know what I mean? Like they're like mythological like beings that are larger than life. And
well, yeah, I've heard a lot of
that's what
actors
people love about Tarantino,
Well, right. I've heard a lot of actors like Malcolm McDowell comes to mind, but I'm sure I've heard others say the same thing, where it's like being what's the word? Naturalistic is boring. Like life is boring. The whole point of movies is to be exciting. You still want it to be believable enough, but it's heightened and so
some subject matters you definitely want to stick to like realism for. A lot of war movies, I think, stuff like that.
Actually, but even look at Apocalypse Now, like that's really kind of surrealistic, but it feels more real because of it, in a weird way. Like,
like they laugh off murder sometimes and are like, isn't that fucking crazy, man?
Right.
Yeah, man.
But then you have like I'd say Platoon there, where is really realistic, and that's equally as powerful, I'd say, in a lot. It's hard to. I don't know. There might not be hard line rules, but
After they talk about the Superman thing, he shoots her with a truth serum and asks her why she wanted to leave the life of an assassin. She told him this story, and we get this flashback.
Well, but I gotta say, this whole thing is like a man-woman total fantasy, right? That you finally get to know what's going on in your woman's head, and like
Yeah.
so he's planned this out forever, and it actually it obviously turns out that Michael Parks was right because this was so planned out, right? He did want to see Beatrix. He's probably thinking about this shit for the past 5 years because he's got truth serum on hand. Everything kind of landed exactly where he wanted it to.
So she's explaining to him why she wanted to quit the life. She was in this, hotel room going to like assassinate someone, like assassinate some world leader. And she takes a pregnancy test and realizes that she's pregnant. And just as that happens, she even drops it, and her dropping it like saves her life because she goes down to get it, and all of a sudden a hole blows through the door from a shotgun, and it's an assassin, a young woman who's an assassin, and they're kind of like positioned to where they kind of have a showdown. They both have guns on each other.
Yeah.
And Beatrix convinces her to just go home because she's pregnant, and it's a more intense scene than that, but they like look for proof, and she's like, I don't know how to read this, and like
what's a lot like the scene from Inglourious Bastards too, where you have what's his name, where you get totally familiar with this character. He's like, I just had a son, like I just want to get, but that obviously turns very sour. In Kill Bill, we actually have the assassin backing away, but and Beatrix could have shot her because she's fumble fucking with the the pregnancy test, right? But I think she even knows that, and so like she's more willing to trust Beatrix, So like,
but now she sees that she wants like there's something out of humanity that she didn't see before,
She even says congratulations at the end of that whole encounter. It's just, but
it may have been an awakening for her too, for that girl.
Right.
But then we catch back up to the normal time, and the location of the scene is changed out to the patio from the living room. And she explains to Bill that that's why she had to leave, because she didn't see the world the same once she knew that she was pregnant. So happy Mother's Day, everybody out there.
Yeah.
And then
it was literally like an on-off moment, right? Where it's like she learned she's pregnant, gunshot through the door. She realized that was fucked up, and
she had faked her death for a while too. One thing that he actually did explain was that it's cruel to let someone you love not know that or think you're dead. They went here for closure, basically. He wanted to, either kill her or her kill him. Like they knew it was gonna I think they both knew one of the other was gonna happen.
And maybe with Bill, it's like his idea of revenge is that she kills him, and now see, you can't have the family life you thought you would. She's quick. She seems to rebound pretty quickly. I mean, or catch her, collect her. But I'm getting ahead. But yeah, I mean, maybe that was his idea. I don't know.
So she sitting across from him, she says, "You and I have unfinished business," and he says, "Honey, you ain't kidding." And then they do like this melee between with the chairs, the swords, and they kind of lock swords. And then she takes her hand and does the 5-point palm exploding heart technique on Bill. And he spurts up blood out of his mouth. And then he looks to her and says, Pai Mei taught you the 5-point palm exploding heart technique, because he never taught that to anyone else. And then she was like, of course he did. She kind of breaks into tears because now she's feeling bad for him, because she loved him. She says to him, am I a bad person? And then he says, no, you're my favorite person, which says a lot. I don't know, it says a lot.
I can fish it out, but yeah, no, but sometimes, baby, you're a real cunt. And so
he stands up and asks, how do I look? And she says, you look ready. And then the music swells up again, and he walks 5 steps out into his backyard and falls to the ground with an exploded heart. And then she walks out of the complex with BB, The next scene we have them, they're in a motel. BB's watching cartoons, and Beatrix is crying with like tears of happiness
With the
and
teddy
or
bear.
sadness and joy. And like, because it looks just sad at first, but then like she starts laughing, and then she
Right.
climbs into bed with BB, and they watch cartoons, and they cut to black. Well, I should say they cut to black, and then cut to like an end credit sequence where we revisit everyone that was in the movie, and then she drives off at the very end with BB.
It's so high contrast that it's just weird as hell. I mean, you have like this mythological Japanese thing with like a character named Pai Mei who's 1,000 years old, and the exploding heart technique, palm technique. And then you have Michael Madsen cleaning up shitty toilet water in a titty bar in the next scene. I mean, like, just the contrast is so extreme, and yet it works. It's a marvel of tone. I think that's what has made Tarantino stand out after all these years. I mean, it's like it's just accomplishing that. I don't know what you'd call it, but
Making the mundane mythological.
that's beautiful. Alliteration. There you go. Yeah, I love that.
So we've kind of talked about influence on society. Influence on society, I think Tarantino as a whole has a greater influence on society than any one of his films. I would say for Kill Bill, it was kind of the beginning of a new stage of Tarantino movies, where I feel like Kill Bill feels more like Inglourious Bastards and Django Unchained than Pulp Fiction a little bit.
Yeah. At least in terms of exploding squibs, like the blood went next level with
blood went next level. Maybe it's just a visual thing, but it's right up there. Well, I don't, because my favorite Tarantino movies are probably Pulp Fiction, Inglourious Bastards, and I think there's a bunch that are tied right in the next tier for me with Reservoir Dogs and Django, and then Kill Bill.
Mine's
and then Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I fucking adored. God damn it. I want to wait for that one to age a little bit though. They are working on a Kill Bill 3, which I think has at least outlines of already.
He's talked about it forever, and as far as like, he did that Rogan interview with Joe Rogan that you sent me, and he was talking, he still seemed hopeful. There's that whole thing where it's like, apparently he and Uma Thurman had bad blood, which I didn't even know about till I'd seen like, what was that, like about 4 years ago now. And so that kind of accounts for that
because Uma Thurman was injured in a car accident on set when they're driving through like the Mexico roads.
Yeah, it sucks too, because it sounded like it was right at the end of production of Kill Bill 2, where it's like, and
it ended on a sour note, like they couldn't.
Because like Uma Thurman was totally like, she wanted Kill Bill. Like, they worked on Pulp Fiction. Uma Thurman was like, when are we gonna do Kill Bill? When are we gonna do Kill Bill? And then he like did it. Like, that documentary you sent me, like he sent it to her as a birthday script. I didn't know about that. That's really cool, because like, this is a passion project for both of them. But unfortunately, it ended on a downer note. So, but I'd love to see a volume 3, but he says he's only going to do one more movie, and he sounds more committed than ever on that, so.
And then if they do, however Kill Bill ends up being spliced together, it'll be the whole bloody affair. It'll have, extended cuts. I think there's probably one day going to be a master Kill Bill fucking trilogy box that's going to have like 3-4 hour movies.
That would be awesome. So what I'm hoping happens is, if he's committed to the 10 movie thing, and I don't, because the whole bloody affair has been like 10 years in the making. I think that if he sits on the idea of, I'm not going to make another movie, he might do the Francis Ford Coppola thing, like he's done with Apocalypse Now and The Godfather 3 now, where he goes in and starts re-editing his movies, and then maybe we'll finally see the whole bloody affair. That would be cool.
Yep. And then as far as recommendations, Dakota, what are some of your recommendations, Dakota?
Shit. Okay, let's see here. I don't want to scratch the tin. Damn it. It's so rare. Okay. So Park Chan-wook, the Vengeance trilogy, the whole bloody thing is worth watching. Old Boy would be the most famous. That's the middle one, came out in 2003, I think. But Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance is great. But the one that would be most relevant to Kill Bill would be Sympathy for Lady Vengeance. The Villainess 2017, I recommended. The whole burial scene in Kill Bill Volume 2, Buried 2010 with Ryan Reynolds. Lady Snowblood, Crying Freeman, Lone Wolf and Cobb, I said those. Game of Death, the bride's black and yellow outfit was clearly inspired by Bruce Lee in that. Hanzo the Razor. Now that has Hattori Hanzo flogging his own penis in like the first 15 minutes because his way of thinking is that, well, he tortures people, but he believes that he should suffer the same tortures that he inflicts. Not because that's like, take what you deal, but because it'll actually enlighten them as to what the best methods for torturing people are. So that's, and another form of torture is that he's so good in bed that he deprives, he's sleeping with the enemy and the woman is begging for more and he withdraws until she just can't stand it anymore and informs him on, what he needs to know about his enemy. So yeah, Hanzo the Razor, those are all great movies. But I haven't seen the rest of them. I haven't seen all the Lone Wolf and Cub movies, but the first installments are all good. Kung Fu, David Carradine, probably who he's most known for. I mean, in retrospect, but I think
there are a lot of recommendations for Tarantino because Tarantino puts a lot of movies in his movies. So
the last one would be, so I said Park Chan-wook for Lady Vengeance. But I would say that Tarantino in general, as Craig Zeller, is great. He's done 3 movies now. Bone Tomahawk with Kurt Russell. Brawl in Cell Block 99 is amazing. And Draped Across Concrete, which I have somewhere on my shelf. It's not specifically tied to Kill Bill, but if you just want to watch a Tarantino-esque movie, that's not like a cheap imitation. It has its own identity. He's doing fantastic. He's only done those 3 movies so far. And then he and Park Chan-wook were going to collaborate on adapting one of his novels, but that doesn't sound like it's going to happen now. But they have similar styles, that fit in that whole Tarantino kind of, vibe.
Okay, so for my recommendations, my biggest recommendation is going to be Sanjuro and Yojimbo by Akira Kurosawa. Now, Sanjuro and Yojimbo are basically a fistful of dollars and for a few dollars more, which is also going to be a recommendation, is the Man with No Name trilogy. These are basically the Japanese and American Western versions of each other. And so great sword fights by like assassins and, that kind of stuff. And then the Western vibe you get in volume 2. I would also recommend The Searchers because that's another vengeance movie and it's a vengeance Western. And you see some visual cues from The Searchers placed into Kill Bill. I recommend any Tarantino, Django, Pulp Fiction, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Inglourious Bastards. And then the other one I would recommend that just came off the top of my head was, I guess Tarantino doesn't like Enter the Dragon, but any Bruce Lee movie, about any Bruce Lee movie, just a good thing in general. All right, so let's go into our ratings, Dakota. Let's do this in a weird way. So let's do it where you rate Kill Bill Volume 1, Kill Bill Volume 2, and then you split the difference.
I actually remember what I gave Kill Bill Volume 1 when I first watched. So that was a 4.5, and then 2 was a 4. Yeah, fuck it, 4.5. I mean, right? I mean,
that's kind of where I live. I have for Volume 1, I have like a 4-star, probably like close to 4.5 though. Like I just think there is a pretty big, for me, jump up between Volume 1 and Volume 2. For me, Volume 2 is a 5-star movie, and I think they kind of split the difference at 4.5 for me.
I dig Volume 2, and I guess thinking about the past 10 years and how much things have been influenced by Tarantino, I haven't seen anything that's done what Volume, because I mean, we just talked about it. That's a marvel of tone. That should not work at all. That like 45 minutes they're talking about their relationship sounds like the most dreadful, horrible ending of all fucking time, and it's amazing. It's fantastically executed. It should not work. I have infinite respect for Volume 2. I mean, God, now I'll stick to my thing for average audiences. If there is a bit of talk, it might bore some. I'll stick to the 4, but I'm more inclined to actually agree with you. It's like, it's probably a 5 in terms of what he accomplished with Volume 2, you know, because that's just incredible. So for those people, yeah, I mean, it's a little talky, Volume 2. Volume 1, almost anybody could enjoy. There's a lot of action. But yeah, personally, I mean, Volume 2 is the larger accomplishment. I definitely agree.
All right. And then with that, I would like to remind everybody to click the like button, subscribe, tell your friends, tell them about, tell your annoying film nerd friends about us so they get off your case.
Yep.
And
again, I like that we are providing a public service, because I know people are annoyed with me. We will get them out of your hair. They can fuck off and come to us. That's what we're doing for humanity.
Exactly. And follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter. For one more time, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. I'm Nate.
I'm Dakota.
And we are the Spoiler Alert Podcast. Have a good day, everybody.